Welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into deconstructing a true global titan, the United States of America. When you think of the US, your mind probably jumps straight to the groundbreaking space exploration over at NASA, the dazzling lights of Hollywood, or just the absolute unmatched scale of its booming economy. It's a nation that literally constantly pushes the boundaries of technology, entertainment, and global politics. But really, how did it get there? And what exactly holds this massive country together? Well, we're going to break down the facts, the history, and the culture to give you a complete, focused picture of the USA. Let's get into it. So, to understand what makes this country tick, we'll be following this 5-part agenda today. We'll map out the superpower, look at its history and politics, check out the economic engine, explore the landscapes and wildlife, and wrap up with culture, tourism, and lifestyle. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Mapping the Superpower, focusing on geography and demographics. 347.3 million. Let that number just sink in for a second. That is the staggering population of the USA. It makes it the third most populated country in the entire world, sitting right behind India and China. And this massive population, it's spread out across an equally massive land area of over 9.8 million square kilometers. That makes it the third largest country by area as well. The whole nation is divided up like a giant puzzle into 50 individual states and one federal district, which is Washington, D.C. Now, 48 of these states sit snugly together on the mainland, but then you've got Alaska way up in the freezing northwest, and Hawaii just kind of floating out there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Now, if you were tuning into this explainer from India, you're dealing with a massive 9.5-hour gap to the US capital. Managing time over there is honestly incredibly complex because the country is literally split into 6 distinct time zones. Eastern Standard Time is the baseline for cities like Washington, D.C. and New York. But as you travel west towards Chicago, Denver, Los Angeles, and eventually Alaska and Hawaii, you have to keep rolling the clock backward, up to 5 hours. And it gets even more complicated with daylight saving time. Clocks in most states jump forward an hour every March to catch more evening daylight. Actually, scratch that. States like Arizona and Hawaii completely ignore this rule, and frankly, who can blame them? Moving right along to Section 2, History and Political Structure, the Foundation of a Nation. This timeline is basically a highlight reel of the nation's story. It kicks off with Christopher Columbus's serendipitous arrival in the Caribbean back in 1492, which, as we know, sparked a massive wave of European colonization. Fast forward to July 4th, 1776. That's a huge, pivotal date when the 13 British colonies adopted the Declaration of Independence. By 1788, the U.S. Constitution went into full effect, creating the structural backbone of the country, with George Washington stepping up as its very first president. Then, the mid-1800s brought a brutal civil war, which ultimately led to the abolition of slavery and forced the creation of a stronger, reunified nation. Finally, pushing through the 20th century, the U.S. participated heavily in both world wars, eventually emerging from the Second World War as the dominant global superpower we all recognize today. What's really fascinating is how the American flag and the Great Seal act as visual history books. The flag, famously called the Stars and Stripes, actually encodes the story of the nation's expansion right into its design. Notice those 13 red and white stripes? They directly represent those original 13 colonies that fought for independence. And those 50 white stars on the blue background? Those stand for the current 50 states. Even the colors are deeply symbolic. You've got red for bravery, white for purity, and blue for justice. And if you look at the Great Seal, there's the bald eagle, powerfully clutching an olive branch to symbolize a desire for peace, but right alongside it, arrows to show an absolute readiness for war. And right in the beak of that bald eagle on the Great Seal is a banner holding this exact phrase, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. This motto perfectly captures the core philosophy of American unity. Politically speaking, the U.S. is a constitutional republic and a representative democracy that uses a federal system. Basically, authority is carefully balanced between the central federal government in Washington, D.C., and the individual state governments. It truly makes them one unified force out of many distinct parts. And honestly, understanding this constant balancing act between state and federal power is absolutely crucial to understanding almost all American politics today. Okay, let's shift gears to Section 3, the economic engine, exploring a global powerhouse. Now, the U.S. operates on a fascinating mixed economy. A lot of people view it as purely capitalist, but it actually balances a high-speed, highly productive private sector with very targeted government support. On one hand, you have intense technological innovation and a highly flexible workforce driving massive corporate profits. But right alongside that, state and federal governments play an active, crucial role. They fund education, they build vast highway infrastructure, and they run foundational healthcare programs. For example, the US boasts incredibly advanced top-tier medical research facilities, but accessing that healthcare as a private citizen can be famously, well, costly. And that is exactly why those government safety nets step in. So, let's talk about the almighty US dollar. It's the global reserve currency. Just to put that into perspective, $1 equals roughly 85 Indian rupees. That anchor really highlights the immense global financial weight we're talking about here. This structural strength is backed up by an incredible diversity of assets. You're looking at an economy boasting the largest GDP in the entire world, heavily driven by a massive service and tech sector. But it's also incredibly resource-rich. They are sitting on deep, deep reserves of coal, oil, and natural gas. Add to that the vast agricultural heartlands that literally feed a huge portion of the world, and you have an undisputed economic juggernaut. And right at the very center of the whole shebang, the New York Stock Exchange, dictating financial trends across the entire globe. Moving on to Section 4, Landscapes and Wildlife, taking a look at the natural wonders. The sheer variety of the American landscape is defined by some pretty wild, dramatic extremes. Geographically, the U.S. is practically a whole world unto itself. On one end, you can be standing in Badwater Basin in California's Death Valley, which is a scorching desert sitting 282 feet below sea level. But then, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, way up in Alaska, you can face the freezing, towering peak of Denali, reaching a dizzying 20,310 feet into the sky. Between these two crazy extremes, the country is split into 8 distinct geographic regions, featuring literally everything from tropical swamps down south to the Great Plains of the Midwest and the majestic Rocky Mountains. And water. Water is the absolute lifeblood of this massive landscape. You can think of these waterways as the nation's historical superhighways. The Missouri River stretches out as the longest in the country, completely vital for the central and western regions. Then you have the mighty Mississippi, which acts as a natural dividing line between the eastern and western halves of the nation, and historically, it served as a critical route for trade. Out west, the Colorado River is famous for doing the heavy lifting to carve out the breathtaking Grand Canyon over millions of years. And bordering Canada up in the north are the Great Lakes: Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario. Together, they make up the largest group of freshwater lakes on planet Earth. Now, the dedication to preserving this biodiversity is immense. It really reflects a deep cultural pride in their open, wild spaces. The U.S. maintains over 430 national park sites nationwide. In fact, Yellowstone, which is super famous for its geothermal geysers, actually holds the title of the world's very first national park. These parks protect some incredible wildlife, ensuring a safe haven for the national mammal, the American bison, and of course, the national bird, the bald eagle. And because of the sheer vastness of the country, the ecosystems are wildly diverse. You can literally freeze your toes off in the Arctic tundra of Alaska or sweat through your shirt in the humid tropical forests of Florida. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, Culture, Tourism, and Lifestyle, a look at everyday life. Just imagine for a second embarking on an epic cross-country road trip. Starting in New York City, you're immediately greeted by the dazzling neon lights of Times Square and the iconic 305-foot-tall Statue of Liberty, which, fun fact, was a historic gift from France. Head down the East Coast to Washington, D.C., and you can take a deep dive into history with the White House and the absolutely incredible Smithsonian Museums. Up north, you've got the roaring Niagara Falls sitting right on the border with Canada, but if you head way out west, you'll hit Utah's mighty 5 national parks. Those feature rock formations that look like they're straight off another planet. And finally, you reach Los Angeles to soak in all the glamour of Hollywood and the major film studios. But hey, you simply can't talk about American culture without talking about the food. And yes, the rumors are true, the portion sizes really are that massive. It's a delicious, high-calorie melting pot of global and regional influences. You have the ultimate street classics, like cheeseburgers and hot dogs. Then there's the deeply satisfying comfort food, rich macaroni and cheese, crispy fried chicken, and sticky barbecue ribs. Oh man. And as you travel, you encounter regional specialties, like the spicy, hearty gumbo down in the south, or the thick, creamy clam chowder up in the northeast. And to finish the whole thing off, traditional desserts like a cinnamon-spiced apple pie or a sweet and tart key lime pie. Absolute must-tries for sure. So, if you are gearing up for that 12,000-kilometer trip from India, keeping a few cultural ground rules in mind will definitely save you a headache. First things first, secure a valid passport and that all-important U.S. visa. Then catch a direct flight from major hubs like Delhi, Mumbai, or Bengaluru. But once you land, etiquette is key. Tipping in restaurants, it isn't just polite, it's practically mandatory. Americans also really appreciate their personal space. Public smoking is widely banned, and making jokes around security personnel is, well, just a really bad idea. When it's finally time to pack up and head home, make sure you leave plenty of room in your suitcase for souvenirs, like high-end electronics, local fashion brands, and loads of American chocolates. And there you have it, folks. From those original 13 colonies to an absolute global superpower, the United States is a nation defined by its scale, its extremes, and its constant, relentless evolution. But after everything we've talked about today, it leaves us with one ultimate question. What exactly does the American dream look like in the 21st century? Now that we've decoded the US on today's Explainer, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, which fascinating destination or complex topic do you want us to deconstruct next? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and keep that curiosity alive until our next Explainer.